Isn't it odd how some stories just seem too bizarre to be mere myths? Imagine walking through the dense forests of Madagascar, where the air feels thick, the trees stretch endlessly skyward, and shadows shift when you're not looking. Now, imagine what if those moving shadows aren't entirely inanimate? What if they're watching you back? Allow me to paint you a chilling tale, a story of terror, survival, and unanswered questions. Welcome to the Nightside Archive. Today we present The Shadow Creatures of Madagascar, a legend comes to life. Every culture has its folklore. In the highland villages of Madagascar, there are hushed tales whispered after nightfall about the Kadra. To outsiders, these shadow creatures seem like nothing more than bedtime fables to keep children indoors. To locals, however, they're far from superstition. They're a warning. These entities are said to dwell in the most uncharted parts of dense forests, where the canopy blocks out even the bravest sunbeams. Villagers swear they are not shadows of living beings, but entities birthed out of darkness itself. While many dismiss such accounts as hearsay, there's an unsettling history to these claims. Let's retrace our steps to where fiction and reality begin to blur. In 1987, French botanist Russo led an exploration team into southeastern Madagascar to study the flora unique to the region. Academic journals anticipated groundbreaking discoveries, but nature had a more sinister script in mind. Dr. Russo's team set up camp on the edge of an unfriendly jungle area, a territory villagers regularly avoided. Locals warned Russo against crossing into it without offering much explanation other than one chilling instruction: do not linger if the shadows grow long without the light changing. Such cryptic advice was brushed off as folklore-induced paranoia, a decision Russo would eventually regret. The first few days were routine, collecting soil samples, photographing rare orchids, jotting down findings. But one particular evening, something unusual happened. Around twilight, a member of the team, a young field assistant named Laurent, reported seeing shadows stretching unnaturally far along the ground, even when the main source of light hadn't moved. He described it as if someone was adjusting an invisible light switch to make the shadows come alive. His fellow team members laughed it off, blaming exhaustion or an overactive imagination. But by the second week, the jovial disbelief dissolved into terror. One laborer vanished without a trace. His absence was something the team initially interpreted as a possible animal attack, though there were no signs of struggle. Then came the hysteria. Sitting around the campfire, each scientist suddenly felt as though pairs of unseen eyes were studying them closely, uncomfortably close. Yet every time they turned to look, there was no one. Some described feeling soft brushes of wind on their skin, though the air was oppressively still. Little by little, each person began feeling the suffocating paranoia of being toyed with by something invisible. What tipped everything into chaos was Dr. Russo's journal entry on what occurred during the expedition's 15th night, the final entry before the entire group disappeared. Russo wrote of waking suddenly in the middle of the night. The campfire that usually sputtered and dimmed by then was roaring brighter than ever, but emitted no warmth. And then there were the shadows surrounding their tents, alternately stretching impossibly far and retreating into warped humanoid shapes. The journal stated these entities had no discernible physical features, just smothering, shapeless forms. Yet, he wrote, one feels naked under its gaze, like it peels one's memories through mere proximity. That entry was discovered weeks later by a search party hired when Russo's team stopped responding. The campsite showed no signs of animal attacks or natural disaster. Backpacks, cookware, and even cameras remained untouched. But the campfire's surrounding area bore scorch marks resembling human outlines, as though people had laid down and dissolved straight into the soil. Everything else about what became of Russo's group remains a mystery. The journal, though partially obscured by mold and weathering, described an unsettling final quote: "They are not of the forest. They are shadows from another place, and we were never going to be allowed to leave." Fast forward decades later, in 2006, rumors reignited interest in the Kadra after several forest rangers ventured near the same region for wildlife monitoring and returned traumatized. These rangers refused to speak openly, but they submitted written statements that shocked their employers. One described seeing trees seemingly swallowed up by lengths of unnatural darkness, visibly darker compared to the surrounding environment. Another ranger insisted the sound of footsteps followed him for hours, but no matter how many turns and dead ends he took, the source remained absent. The most chilling account came from a ranger who claimed he saw distorted figures, like humanoid shadows with erratic spasms, crouched behind foliage. They appeared frozen, motionless until he blinked, and then they were inexplicably closer. Skeptics often attribute the belief in Madagascar's shadow creatures to atmospheric illusions caused by dense foliage, humidity, and optical distortions. But despite every scientific dismissal, local villagers maintain their ancient line of caution. Do not enter the woods alone, and do not speak to the shadows. As of today, no definitive evidence of the Kadra exists, a hauntingly blank slate for a creature so palpably feared by its community. Were they merely hallucinations fueled by dehydration and paranoia? Or are there phenomena in this world that deliberately defy physical documentation? The sigh of the wind through those forests remains cautionary. Bewilderment shows us how far removed we are from explanations. Madagascar's forest floor, restless shadows, and inexplicable absences fuel the notion. We still do not fully understand what brushes shoulders with humanity when the sun dips well below the canopy. So, dear viewer, next time the shadows seem to elongate across your room inexplicably, consider this. What if the darkness isn't content merely surrounding you? What if, just occasionally, it decides to observe you back? Until next time, dwell in curiosity but tread lightly in darkness. This has been the Nightside Archive.